Hi guys, today there is this Voronoi story we have to get through. So Voronoi is a very great texture. Let's just bring one here. Voronoi texture. That if we look at distance, it has all these nice cells, and if we use a burn dodger, which is a personal node that helps me to just map range these things nicer. Okay, we can have all these random dots showing on the screen, or this kind of effects. And today we're going to look at something else, which is the 1D effect of the Voronoi node. So 1D is going to display nothing in this case, because it's no longer going to take the generated coordinates by default compared to 3D or 2D. It's going to take a W, just one dimension. So that dimension can be provided by just giving X or Y or Z dimension. So let's give him X right now. And now we have this. So as you see, this is one of the nicest way to obtain randomness in these separation of lines. So I'm going to take this back to the normal way that Voronoi displays. So it's going to separate things. It's basically the same as in 3D, but this is just going to be in one axis, which is the x-axis. Is going to make cells spawn with a certain length that is randomized. This can be very useful in many cases when we want to make lines that are not just repeatable lines, because if you set randomness to 0, now all these lines are actually the same width, but we use the randomness factor to push this in a random way. And this effect we can use a lot to bring, let's say, fanciness to the eye and make it a little bit more interesting than just repetitive lines. Sometimes it can get boring. So this randomness factor we absolutely appreciate it to be there. So sometimes it's a little bit too random, like these differences between the huge part here and the very small part here can be annoying, but you can fix that by putting it to 0.5, and then this randomness is a little bit clamped, which okay, is a nice effect to use. So now you can use this same burn dodger, which is like basically all of these color burn, color dodge, soft light, linear light, invert, whatever. These effects to try to segregate white and black backgrounds into, like, push them in different directions, and then have like more pronounced separations. Or what you can do like this, I can push the blacks and I can push also the whites, which means now if I push it to the extreme, we will have some effect that has no smoothness in between. But if I lower this a little bit, I get my smoothness back. I can have I can push my lines to a higher degree. I mean, okay, this is what that node is doing. So that node is good for me to display many types of gradients. Sometimes very useful for bump, when you want to control the amount of bumpiness, or some straight lines and some soft areas. You can quite simulate with this node, because it also has a soft factor. Let's look what the soft factor does. Okay, it softens this. It softens the gradient. So if you look at this gradient, there is some kind of a line here, and in the black we cannot see, but there is going to be similar one. But when you put soft factor higher, the soft factor controls the soft light node, which is going to be trying to reach white, but with a soft light blend mode, which is just trying to smoothing stuff out. Then linear is going to push all values somewhere, just like if you added something, like added some value to it. So it's just going to push it higher or lower, and then the invert factor just gonna have you invert your own that node. It's gonna invert the result of this node. So that's it. Anyway, this node is also findable in the pack of useful helpers nodes. So when we have this Voronoi node of 1D, that gives us basically that. What can you use it for? So this looks like a barcode. It's not very interesting. Well, you can use it for a barcode though, but at the same time you can also take any kind of a function, like what I like to use is this SDF pack, this sign distance field functions, or whatever you want to call it, but it's like basically so I'm going to plug in an arrow just for the example. I'm going to plug an arrow instead of that Voronoi. I'm going to plug an arrow into there with the actual vector. What is it giving to me? An arrow, right? So this is an arrow, but it also has the gradients that I need. This is the sign distance field nodes are good for giving us not only the super shape, but giving us all these necessary gradients here that we can see from black to white. That means that if I want to make something funny with that too, I can wrap it from 1 to 0. So then I have this, and then if I add anything there, if I add math here, it's gonna repeat that arrow forever for me, like in a funny way. It's kind of smooth in this because this is what the sign distance function does. But okay, I'm not sure I can do it here, right? This is just adding the gradient. So now we're if we do it after the wrap function, then we have just control over the whites and the blacks. Anyway, we're not going to use this SD arrow. We're going to use another one. So I repeat, this SDF pack is a very brilliant pack. I will let the link in description. It's basically for free. It's on Github as well, and it happens to be quite useful for anytime you need some just function. So let's use a star for now. A star. So if he doesn't have the vector, he's not going to be able to know what's going on. And that star is here. Radius. Okay, we can have this. We can have more branches to it. Oh, it looks like the radius is too big. Yeah, this kind of star. What can we change it to have a something more star looking? Okay, so this randomize my shape. There is the wrap function. I wish I could. Maybe I should do something else, but I don't know. Oh, what did we have here? Yeah, this kind of stuff. So this kind of stuff is there. Okay, which means if I add something here, add math, once again, it's gonna push my things here. So I guess when there's many angles like this, it's difficult to keep that star exactly. So yes, I'm thinking maybe we can add a wrap node before that, but I'm not sure this is gonna work. A wrap node, wrap vector math of 1 to 0. Ah, okay, so this is gonna do that. This is not what we actually want. I'm still in the object. 1 to -1 maybe. Okay, we have this. Okay, it's gonna give us all these stars, repeating and repeating, repeating. Which is already a nice effect. And if we don't like this, we can probably vector math this one here. So add in a vector math way, and I will add z to this. And z, okay, does this. X, of course, we're gonna do this, repeat in x, and y is gonna repeat in y. So what if I add everything? No, this is gonna look crazy. So we still do not have our effect correctly, but what if I do that? Okay, this pushes everything away. This does the same as before, it just Yeah, it just is a little bit confusing. So instead of that, let's just take another star, just some kind of square, which I had there. So this is my square function. It's quite the same actually, it's just going to be the same. So I'm going to duplicate that, put it here, put the same vectors here, and let's look at that. What's going on here? We have a smooth minimum of the x and the y that are range compared with us. So this is a personal node, but it's just doing some map range stuff. It's just basically a compare node, but with the that keeps the gradient on with the fall off. So let's look at this. What's this? So this is my range compare node. So I can lower the epsilon to this. So actually, what is a compare node would do? Just a compare node of the x with the value of this. No, the value of 0 and the epsilon of this, just like this node does. Let's look at this. So we have this, but we no longer have the gradient, because the compare is like the compare node is quite like a greater than or something like this that works in both ways with the epsilon. So this is going to be 0, and then the epsilon of 0.470, it means that. So it's going to compare between those two, but now this map range compare gives us the same result, but it keeps the gradient in for us. If I want to remove the gradient, I can say fall off to 0. Fall off to 0 is going to make us exactly like a compare node, but this one gives us preserves the gradient for us. Then if I have this one and if I have this one, which is the same thing but on the y-axis, then I can have a square in the middle by doing that. Now I have a square, and since it's a smooth minimum, it's going to round the corners. If it's just a minimum, it's just going to have straight corners with no smoothing. So I put this on the smooth minimum. Where is it? Here. And now I have a distance dynamic value that I can change like this. Very famous things. So now I want this function to be inverted, and and this is the result I have. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to do just like here. I'm going to subtract this like this, and this what is it? This is the time. So this is frame time control. All right, because this is just a simple divider to make sure that my frames are 500. If you look at here, I'm 500 frames, so 500, and then divider by 5. I want this effect to loop 5 times within the things of within the length of 500 frames. So I got this result here. I'm going to subtract it. Subtract math, bang, and I have this here. Okay, what does that do? Okay, it does that. It does this, and then it gets to white at some point. Now what I want is actually this effect to be wrapped again. So wrap like this. Let's put this to 1, and then I want to wrap this effect so it repeats. Wrap is kind of like the fraction. Absolutely, I could use a fraction node for this, but sometimes the fraction doesn't offer me anything. Wrap is going to be the same as a fraction, but the fraction doesn't offer me anything to modify. Sometimes wrap is cool for this. Maybe I can change whatever I want here. So let's do this effect again, and you will see that it starts to loop again and project me on another square. Let's change this to, what was it? Like 0.5 maybe, or maybe this was 1. Yeah, this was 1. So we skipped that black cross effect we just saw before. So now these squares are going to be repeating. Okay, so we're happy with that. And now instead of repeating this square like crazy, like how would you, like this? So we would repeat this square like many times, like actually 4 times instead of 1. So this squares is repeating, so it's cool. But now we want the same effect, but with some variation, like these joints, lines, this distance we want them to be randomized a little bit. So this is when Voronoi is a good idea to use. So if you take what was it, that square function that you passed to the x, and you use Voronoi, and let's see what this does. Okay, it does that. So it does this. I didn't add anything. I'm gonna add something as well. I'm gonna subtract something as well here, the same. I'm gonna subtract it, and we will see that this Voronoi is gonna go random until the end of times. Like really is gonna go random until the end of times, like forever. And all of these distances are now very randomized. But there is a little issue with this. So now we enter into the blocking parts in shading. This is a problem for Voronoi, that we want a distance, but sometimes we don't want a gradient that goes from 0 to 1 to 0. Sometimes we want a gradient that is the opposite of ping pong here. We want a gradient that goes from 0 to 1, and then here 0 again to 1. And this right now is quite impossible because Voronoi node is not made in this way. So color is going to give us some random colors for every segment, every part of every cell that he considers a cell, like a unit cell for him. So since we are working with these coordinates, which we don't see now, but can we? Yeah, like with these coordinates for him, he's thinking all of this is one coordinate, all of this is one direction. This is what the square function does. So for him, this is one direction, one coordinate. That's why we put it in the 1D, and when the distance gives us, he can repeat that in the 1D we described in the SDF function from earlier, this SDF square function. Let's just put this in a J and call it square. Square, like that. Which means now let's see what W gives us. Oh, W is cool as well. It gives us some information of kind of we could use as index. Like this is a 0.3, this is a 0.5, this is a 0.7, this is a 0.9, or something like that. So this can be useful later. But in order to find that gradient I was talking about, this one that goes from 0 to 1 and then 0 to 1, this one is very difficult to find from this only. So that's why we have this, we have created this Voronoi 1D node that is right here, that is going to be doing quite the same, but it has more fields to it. Not these fields, the output fields. So you can look at value from there. So value is actually going to give you that. This is 0, and this is 1, and this is 0, and this is 1, and repeatedly. So now we have this Voronoi that has this gradient as well as the distance 1, which is the same as this one, or similarly, I don't know. I mean, I'm tricking the node, the node actually. In this node, I'm tricking it so it's not going to give the same result. But how to say? On the gradients, these are the similar gradients. We will look inside the node in a few moments. Let's just delete that for now. We don't need it anymore. Then we still have the color and we still have the W. We also have the randomness factor here, which I can bring back to 0. If it's 0, then it's completely the same. And then I'm going to change some factors here, some randomness. But I like this randomness to be not too extreme, so I'll keep it at 0.5, and then you see that when it grows up, it will have this it looks like there's similar lines, but one is actually bigger than the other, and etc, which is cool. And this value shows it a little bit better, how these lines are varying. So there is actually randomization going on here. So now that we have this, we can do as previously here. What did I do here? Multiply, subtract, snap, wrap. Yes. And color loop. Okay, this is going to be all interesting content, but to be just explaining how can we reach this Voronoi is because we are actually using one Voronoi to guide the second one. And from the second one we can do this mathematic transformation to obtain that actual value, that gradient that we were missing, the gradient from 0 to 1, 1, 1, 1, and 0, and repeating 0, 1, 0, 1. This gradient, we definitely need it. We cannot have this ping pong guy that goes from 0 to 1 to 0. This is going to be very tricky for us. We cannot do much with that. There's a uses case that are fine with this, but sometimes we need also the other one. Yes. So in that case, the fun part is that this is always going to be 1 and this is always going to be 0. So even if this distance is variating, this is still going to be 1 and this is still going to be 0. So this is precious for us because this means now we know the distance, and it's not because of this is, if this was the base, then it'd be like 0, 1, 0, but this suddenly would be like 0 and then 1.5 and then 0, and this is not helpful for us. We don't want that. We want this to be always 1 in the center and always 0 on the side, so that we can have our there is cases that we want this part to be always consistent, actually the sides, and I will explain this a little bit further, while the center here to be consistent is not very much of a problem for us. Most of the time we're interested in the borders of this. And then if we look at value, then we are sure that this part is consistent somehow. This part is consistent, 1, 1, 1. While I'm not sure, yeah, this 0 is also consistent, but yes, it looks like stronger here because the gradient is longer, so we have more grays. While here the gradient is lower, so we have a little bit less grays before it becomes white. But just to say that now we have consistent gradients, which means now we can start to make very complex textures out of this. So what is the example of textures? But just before I will explain, I will demonstrate. So in the same exact same principle, I will delete all that, and I would this one as well, and I will start to show you this one. So this one is cool because I'm having these randomized squares coming in and out. So if I subtract it or if I add it, it's gonna make the opposite effect. No, I'm not adding the right one. Sorry, I'm doing the wrong thing. This is the one. So now the effect is going backwards. So because I'm just adding time or subtracting time to that distance function. But the thing is that this Voronoi, it can give me that very precious gradient that looks like it's layer of over layer. If I remove that gradient here, then we have just this plain shapes, plain color fields. But if I add back this gradient, then I get my kind of the effect I want of these layering down. So I can always do this. I can also invert this factor to have the effect going backwards. And now these gradients are layering up. It looks like these shapes are all one over the other, and then this one is layering it down. So I just had to invert the sign function here. Okay, so now there is many ways. I have this RGB loop because this is the wrap. So this is the wrap function that gives me this actual W is used in concordance with the value, the gradient we had. This is the old technique of how to find indexes of your cells, because when you have this gradient only, you lost the indexes of your cell. All your cells are like this, 1 0 1 0, but you don't know which one is which. So you want sometimes to have like 1, like 2, 3, 4. You want this. So this thing is, the trick is by, when you have your function here, this is your function, SDF function, you have your Voronoi on it. Now you want to subtract, most of the time, the result of that Voronoi from the original coordinate. So let's say if you have a Voronoi texture, I'm here, I have a texture coordinate. This is a very nice trick. I mean, not the trick, but this the actual way to find back your coordinates from a texture. When you have position here, you will subtract vector math. You will subtract this to that, and now you will have your coordinates showing up in each cell. So these are the coordinates designed for each cell, which means now you can start to make more things in there, or repeat images, or do some stuff, because now you have unit dependent coordinates. So if I scale that, you will see scale. I scale these coordinates. I can have okay, it doesn't show like this, but if I put some kind of image, do I have an image? I have an image somewhere. I have an image. Image texture. I have this image, I think. Yes, this one. I'm going to put it there just to show you. It's distorted, but it's okay. So if I scale this, the image is going to repeat like this in every cell. So now I can treat my cells. This is the trick for having cell-dependent coordinates. So we use the same trick, but since we are in one dimension, we're just doing it in without vector math node. With simple math node, it's the same. So we're subtracting the result of this of this Voronoi here from what it was before, from the coordinates that the Voronoi took. But at the same time, we have to multiply it by W. This was the trick, because if you do not, let's look at this. Okay, we have this, for example. Let's just go a little bit further. Okay, we have this. Now they're repeating this from black to blah 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 to white, and then if we go really far, it's all going to be white because it's not repeating yet. But if we are here, if I do not multiply this by the W, so I'm just going to explain W. But if we do not multiply it by W, then we will have just this thing that remains with a gradient. That gradient, and we don't want this gradient because we want an index, a full color here, a full value. So this we have to multiply it back with the W in order to have a full value per each unit. That's just the trick in there. And now that you have this, you can snap it to what you want. Like I snapped it to like 5, and I wrap it again against 1, and then it's gonna repeat every time it goes over 1 divided by 5. It's gonna repeat. So I had this value going like this, 0, 1 going all the way around, and then it's gonna like it 2, 3. It's gonna go like this. But then because of this wrap, I'm making it go like 0 again, 0, not 2, 3, not 1, and then 0, and then 1. It's repeating in this way. And then you also have this snap that may have me being able to snap it in 5 different. Instead of having one value from 0 to 1, I have 5 values of 0 to 2.2 and 0.4 and etc. This is what the scalar node does. The scalar node, it does this for us. I set 5, multiply by 5 on this way, and divide the result by 5 on this way, which means 1 divided by 5. I hope I'm not going too fast, but at the same time, I don't want to waste people's time. So, now that we have this value wrapped, we can play it. It's going to repeat the color we want at the exact index we want in the dynamic randomization of the Voronoi node that we asked for. So randomness 1, randomness 0.5 is going to be a little bit less random, like that. And now that we have this, we can simply go in put some color ramp or some stuff on this, because now I have this RGB loop which basically does the same. It takes this color ramp from the RGB thing at constant. So this color ramp will look like this. This is used for me to make a loop between FPS and like a looping situation in between frames. But now I'm using it only for this 0 to 1 range, so that's why I cast everything to 1. And now it's repeating RGB, RGB, RGB. So the same for this HSV loop, which is some kind of color ramp, but it's this one on the HSL value, which is gonna go from the red to red and loop all over again on the kind of how do you call that, rainbow prism, or LED prism, or HSV color prism. And this one is going to give us this, so it repeats the rainbow colors, kind of like that. Okay, if I didn't snap it, what is going to give us? Okay, it gives us some other stuff, which is also cool. Okay, so anyway, it's like that. But then the funny thing about this Voronoi node is that I still have this gradient that we were talking from before, the gradient that can be applied from here to here. So 0, 1, that gradient is going to be cool. And we have it here, and we have it there. So let's look at the result of that. And now we have it. We have the gradient added to our generated repeated shapes with some Voronoi randomization. The last one is this kind of color ramp node, the custom color ramp node that I like to set up with the steps. So this is basically the same, but it's just the color I chose. I chose those colors to be not in a color ramp, but to be in some colors you can define outside of a group, with some steps you can define outside of the group. So anyway, I hope you have fun with this, because the next thing we're going to look at is what this Voronoi node can do if you apply it to 2D or 3D. And this is going to be basically that. A nice stone wall that you can look from here, that is repeating, but randomly repeating on this length, but also on this height. They're all different, they're all different, they're all different, and they're also all different, all different, all different. So now we can really reach a kind of a brick wall texture, or like more than a brick, just a stone wall texture, or some kind of fun wooden stuff. It depends on the material you slap on it. But yes, you can have this, and you still can have all your indications for this length and this length. It doesn't matter if they're bigger or not, if they're slightly changing, that angle is always going to be correct. This rounding part, these gradients are always going to be the gradients, they're going to be uniform from cell to cell. So this is why we have two types of things. We have some gradients that are going to be not uniform, they control all that width as 0 to 1, but sometimes we have some gradients that comes from here and goes from there, that these gradients are going to be consistent everywhere. This is the power of this Voronoi node. Then you can also even put it in 3D. So now you have these Voronoi walls that I shall explain in the next video. So thanks a lot for watching that far, and you guys have a nice time playing with Blender shaders.